Have you ever stopped to think about that little, colorful stamp on an official document? Probably not, but what if I told you that tiny piece of paper could be the difference between a legally binding contract and a worthless piece of paper? Today, we're pulling back the curtain on the Myanmar Stamp Act to find out why this little stamp has so much power.
So let's just dive right in with a question that honestly should make you think twice about the documents you've signed.
I'm serious. Think about the big ones. The deed to your house, the lease on your shop, that loan you took out. Are you 100% positive that they're legally solid, that they'd hold up in court?
And that's the kicker. That's the whole point. One tiny, easily missed detail, the lack of a proper stamp, could literally make your entire agreement unenforceable. It's a small mistake with potentially huge, massive consequences.
Now, this is exactly where the Myanmar Stamp Act steps in. It's a system that's been around for a long time, and it was designed to solve this very problem. It really has two main jobs. First, it makes sure your documents are legally legit. It gives them teeth. And second, it's a way for the state to collect revenue, kind of like a tax. Simple, but super important.
So now we get why these stamps matter so much. The next logical question is, what exactly needs one? The Act has some specific legal language, so let's just quickly break down the key terms you need to know. Okay, first up, the word instrument. It sounds a bit technical, right? But the way the Act defines it is actually super broad. It's basically any document that creates, changes, or even just records some kind of legal right or responsibility. So we're talking contracts, deeds, bonds, pretty much any official paper that carries legal weight.
Next is conveyance. This one's more specific. It's all about the act of legally transferring property from one person to another. The classic example is selling a house or a piece of land, but really it covers any time property officially changes hands.
And this brings us to the most important idea of all, duly stamped. See, for a document to count, you can't just slap any old stamp on it. It has to have the right type of stamp for the right amount of money, and it has to be attached in the right way. If you mess up any one of those things, it's not duly stamped. It's that simple.
So what kinds of documents are we talking about? The Act has a huge list called Schedule I. Here are some of the most common ones you'd run into. And what you'll notice is that for things like a lease or a property sale, the stamp duty isn't a flat fee. It's calculated based on the value of what's happening. The more the rent or the higher the sale price, the more you're going to have to pay in stamp duty.
Okay, so we know what needs a stamp and why. But what about the practical side of things? Let's get into the nitty-gritty. Who actually pays for it? When does it need to get done? And what do these stamps even look like?
The Act is actually very clear on who has to pay. The general rule of thumb is this: the person getting the benefit or making the promise is the one who pays. So, if you're buying a property, it's on you, the buyer. If you're renting, it's on you, the tenant. Getting a mortgage, it's on you, the borrower. Now, of course, you and the other party can agree to something different in your contract, but this is the default rule.
Now this is absolutely crucial, so listen closely. Stamping is not something you can just do later whenever you get around to it. The law says the stamp has to be on that document before anyone signs it, or at the very latest at the exact moment of signing. It's not an afterthought, it's considered part of the signing process itself. And what are these stamps anyway? Well, there are two main kinds. The first is an impressed stamp. Think of this as being built right into the paper. It's embossed or printed on by an official. Then you have the adhesive stamp, which is pretty much what it sounds like. It's like a postage stamp that you stick on. But here's the important extra step. An adhesive stamp has to be canceled. That usually just means signing or writing the date across it so it can't be peeled off and used again on some other document. It's a simple but really important security measure.
All right, so we've gone through all the rules, but what happens if you break them? What are the actual real-world consequences when an important document isn't duly stamped? This is where it gets serious.
And this is the big one. This is the knockout punch. The law is crystal clear. If a document isn't stamped properly, it has zero legal power. You can't use it as evidence in court. A judge won't even consider it. No public officer can act on it. That agreement you thought was ironclad, it effectively becomes just a piece of paper.
So when a court or some other authority finds an unstamped document, they're required by law to impound it, which is just a fancy legal term for seizing it. And to get it back and make it valid, you can't just pay the original fee you missed. Nope, you have to pay the missing stamp duty and a penalty on top of that. So how bad is the penalty? It can be really, really bad. The law gives authorities the power to charge a penalty of up to 10 times the amount of stamp duty you were supposed to pay in the first place. All of a sudden, what seemed like a minor oversight can turn into a very, very expensive mistake.
But look, the law isn't just about dropping the hammer on people. It also recognizes that, honest mistakes happen. So let's look at how the Act actually gives you a way to correct these kinds of errors.
Thankfully, there's a bit of a safety net built into the system. If a stamp gets ruined, or maybe you use it on the wrong document by accident, you're not automatically out of luck. The Act has provisions for what it calls allowances, which is just another way of saying refunds or replacements.
And the law is surprisingly down to earth about this. It lists a bunch of common situations where you can apply to get an allowance. For instance, maybe there was a typo that spoiled the document before anyone even got to sign it. Or perhaps a deal fell through and the stamped paper was never used at all. It even covers situations where you end up using a different, correctly stamped document to finalize the deal, which makes the first one totally useless.
So that brings us right back to our very first question. That tiny, overlooked stamp is the legal linchpin holding your most important agreements together. It's what ensures your rights, your property, and your business are protected by law. Now that you know its real power, maybe it's time to double-check your documents, right?